Welcome to the Hellcat Dogman page. Today we're gonna do. I got a special treat for y'all. We're gonna do a memorial on Mike Wilder, aka Rock Bottom Kennels, told by one of his, one of his, guy that looked up to him in the dog world by the name of Cisco. We got Cisco on the line. What's going on, Cisco?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Yes, sir. How was your holiday? Thanksgiving,
It was
rather.
it was pretty good. How about yours?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Average. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So, well, let's go on a little bit about you. How long you been into the dogs? Like, when you first got into the dogs.
I've been in the dogs probably since the say about 90.
Oh, okay.
Uh, but grew up in Brooklyn, kind of like in a rough neighborhood.
Right.
Uh, and at that time, there was a lot of really well-known dog guys in the late 80s to early 90s. Uh, was New York had a lot of big name guys.
Right.
And even though I was a kid, I was blessed to be around Yankee boys, Bill Ashton, Dirty Steve, Sammy the Arab, just as far as people that your listeners would know of. That was
Right.
prominent names.
Right. Right.
And but I was a kid and didn't really have the money. Even though I would be around them, I didn't have the money to play in the big leagues at that time. And as I got older, I started getting more money and learning more. And I had a friend of mine that had a dog, and when they got out of the dogs, they let me get this dog, and this dog was amazing. I mean, in every aspect, a dog man's dream. I mean, from conformation to pedigree to performance to producer to everything you could think of. So when the dog passed, died young, there was an ad in the journal, the old journal, like when Jack Kelly had it,
Right.
and I had remember where they told me they got the dog from. So I seen that Mike had an ad, and I called that number, and I told Mike about how amazing the animal was, and told him I want another one, and his response to me was, I guess you want me to walk on water as well, and that's gonna be extra hard for me being that I'm in a wheelchair.
Wow. So,
And that's how, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, no, no. I guess you was leading up to. That's how you first came in contact with your mentor, Mike.
Correct. That's how I first came in contact with Mike Wilder. Yep.
Well, this is a memorial about him. So I guess you could go into more detail about it. About him. So what type of dog man would you say, was he more of a breeder, or more as a conditioner, like, or he just had all of it, the
Well,
tools of the trade?
being that he was restricted to a wheelchair, he was more of a breeder. Because,
Right.
but he was one of the top breeders of I mean, I'd say the dog that people made. If you were in for people that were really bulldogging, especially in the southern states, they might remember Kamikaze, who Mike was partners with him. But even after when they went their separate ways, not because of a falling out or nothing, but Mike Gregory, I believe, got sick anyway. To make a long story short, even as rock bottom, anyone that was bulldogging would remember Mike. But I guess he was most for people that may be coming in or not really sure. They would probably remember Hunter Red, Rawhide, and just as an example of Mike as a breeder, Crenshaw, Brent Hunter Red, and not taking nothing away from Crenshaw, he was a great dog man himself. But he didn't really feel Hunter Red was much worth keeping on his yard. And then Hunter Red went to Thomas Smith. Thomas Smith read to Mike Wilder. And like I said, for anybody who knows, for those who don't know, Hunter Red produced amazing for Mike and really wasn't bred as much as his brother Deacon. That just, tells you kind of like the eye that Mike had, as a breeder.
Oh, so Mike had owned Hunter Red for some time.
Yes, sir. Yep. And Hunter Red produced very well for Mike. Mike put a lot of great dogs in different dog man's hands, and something I'd like to point out too is to this day, there's a few people, not many, but there's a few people that that use not just his dog, but his method of breeding and the same standards, and actually, his dog. You're talking maybe 50 years later, and they're having great success,
Right. Now,
and that's impressive.
some of the more well-known dogs from his that he was associated with would be what's that Grand Champion
Shotzi, Honey, Hugo, yeah, yeah. He, yeah, Mike had those dogs. That was when he was with Kamikaze.
right,
He didn't actually breed them, but he did have these. Mike has been when Mike when back when Jack Kelly ran the Journal, he would call Mike and tell and and say and let Mike know what's out there, and Mike would gladly take on anyone. It didn't matter who it was, and I really don't want to call out any names because this is more of a tribute to Mike, not really to bash nobody. But there
right,
was a pretty famous guy, famous female dog, and and Mike called him out, and the guy declined, and that's happened on more than one occasion because they knew, when Mike shows up, he's real one of the best man to ever legend,
right, right,
and as a person, he's from the old school where your name really meant something. I'm sure you heard of George Long.
right. That
George Long
that's
had
the
somebody had. Go
yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
George Long had on Long's widow, right? That's
Weirdo and Abe. Yep, yep.
right, right, right,
I mean, he had other dogs, but those would be the ones that people probably think, first that comes to mind.
right,
And somebody had offered George Long $10,000 for Abe back in the '90s. That's a lot of money now, but back in the '90s, $10,000, that's a lot of money.
right,
George turned it down, so to send it to Mike, and Mike had Abe for a while, and Abe produced real pretty good for Mike. He produced Rawhide, just as far as one of the more well known ones. Yes, but like I said, out of respect for we got OGI in the Midwest and Indiana. There's a guy in Louisiana that's still active, and they probably don't really want me going too much into because they actually doing what what Mike taught me. You know what I mean? So I don't really want to go too much into that
right,
because it's competitive and you don't want people having
right, right,
so out of respect for them. But with conditioning, he liked a free turn and slap mill, and I mean conditioning, man. It's a lot of it is common sense. I mean, the most important thing is having a healthy dog. I mean,
right,
everybody knows
right,
that.
right,
I think what separates conditioning is people putting in the time. It's a lot of work. I know people don't realize what kind of time and effort it takes to put a dog into shape in any kind of competition, whether it's Schutzen training, weight pulling, any type of training that you do. You got you really got to dedicate yourself. You want the dog to give you 100%. You got to give the dog 100% of you.
right. So he ever, Mike ever talked to you about any of the famous matches he might have seen over his years with the dogs?
Oh, sure, yeah. But most of them, I mean, for me, being around Mike, he was a larger than life figure for me. I know everybody has, like maybe somebody likes baseball and they like, maybe down, I don't know, pick them or like baseball, basketball. He might like Michael Jordan. To me,
Right,
that was Mike Wilder. So when he would talk about the dogs of the past, I would more like be in like the now and then. You know what I mean? Like one time he had sent me something, and well, actually, it was this one time he sent me something, and then I went back to where he was. I was still in New York, but I went down south to the show and these guys came from the Virgin Islands. They had a two-time winner, and it was a said to be a badass, a killer. And Mike rolls down in a wheelchair, smiling ear to ear. Hey man, what we waiting on? I said, hey man, just I think they weighed their dog. I think it's over. Mike said, I don't give a shit. Matter of fact, the hell with that scale. And he told him, he said, there's no way. He looked at me and said, it's a Frisco Sorrells cross, and there ain't no way a Frisco Sorrells dog could beat something I bred. Then looked at the guys and laughed and said, hey, you want to bet some more money?
Mm.
And 35 minutes, it was over. We won. And that's not to just, your listeners, if they like Frisco Sorrells dogs, it's not to shit on Frisco and Sorrells. I'm just telling a story here,
Yeah,
where Mike was,
but that's
he
that's
just had an
you,
amazing
you
eye.
just you just talking about the type of that's how he felt about his breedings, and
Well, yeah, and,
it's
and
all
the,
out of
the guy,
competition.
well, the guy that's still, there's a guy in Louisiana, and I was friends with his cousin, and this guy here, he lives 30 minutes away from one of the most famous dog breeders, and he was getting his ass handed to him. And when he finally started messing with with me like his cousin and started dealing with Mike and trying Mike's dogs and Mike's way breeding program, how to just keep them as a whole. Now that guy is one of he's just doing amazing.
Right.
Mike was just one of the rare, like the people like that, just they don't make him like Mike anymore. I mean, his as game as his dogs were, Mike was just an amazing person. Game is he was dead game.
So in reference to his like his health, that didn't limit him to his.
Not at all. And not at all. Mike did everything that we do. I remember one time going through the mountains with him. He's driving. He's using a fucking cane to push the gas pedal and the brakes. And we're going down a windy mountain. Yeah, nothing stopped Mike. He lifted weights. He did, pretty much. He drove. He did everything we do. He actually, he'll go out there, feed the dogs. Everything that we do. And he had every reason to to be angry because he wasn't born that way. An
Right.
accident happened to him when he was about 18, and so and then living the rest, another 40 years in a wheelchair. I mean, I know I'd be bitter.
Right.
Mike always looked at the glass half full instead of half empty.
So you said you met him in '90.
No, no, I met Mike. I want to say about '02.
So when you met him in '02, how long prior to that had he been into dogs? You know that.
I want to say probably '80s. Definitely, definitely. I was I not 100%, but I want to say the early '80s. Mike was doing it. Like when he was kamikaze, it was easier for him in the sense of because Mike Gregory wasn't in a wheelchair, so it was. But what made Mike so well known and so trusted was his word. Like if Mike said something, you take that to the bank. It's 100% nobody, and I mean nobody in existence today could ever say a bad word about Mike. Even the people that he competed against. There's no breathing human being that could ever say anything not honestly. I'm sure there's somebody could lie on him, but nobody could ever honestly say that Mike ever did. There's nothing negative to say about him.
Right.
Yeah, if
Oh,
Mike did a deal with you, he wanted to make sure that he did everything in his power to make sure it went right. I remember I got kind of mad at him because sometimes he was at the short end of the stick. Just the way people are, they take advantage of you if they think if mistake kindness for weakness. A guy from overseas had bought two puppies, and Mike held on to these puppies for 2 years, man. And the guy never sent anything other than the cost of the puppies.
Right.
Now, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I'm sorry. You buy something from me and it's 8 weeks old to 10 weeks old, and it's there till it's 2 years old, you forfeited that, buddy. But Mike didn't feel that way. And and I told him that, and I was kind of upset, because I love Mike, and I kind of felt he's being taken advantage of. And the guy called him when these bitches were 2 years old and told Mike he'd like to breed each one of them to two different males that he had. And mind you, the dog's been there 2 years. And Mike said, "Well, okay, but I'd like to have half the litter." And the guy was like, "Whoa, fuck that! You're asking for too much." But Mike didn't get. Of course, Mike was pissed. Like Mike's still a human being. But what he did was he did the breeding. He told me, if I could. I was still in New York. He asked me if I could at least meet him halfway and get the pregnant dogs, and drop them to the guy, and wash his hands with them. But the point is that Mike held up his end of the deal. You know what I mean? No matter what.
Well, and on that, I think he went in above and beyond his end of the deal because that's like you said, holding on to some puppies for 2 years. Like you said, that
Uh,
you forfeit that.
Absolutely, but that's Mike. Like I said, they don't make, they don't. He's old school. You know what I'm saying? Like he's from back in the day where your word meant something. And you got to remember too, like when I'm sure you remember, because you're no offense, but you're probably not in your 20s. I'm sure you remember when before internet.
Yeah, definite.
And so when the journal, there was a time where to get the Sport and Dog Journal, man, you really had to know somebody.
Yeah,
You couldn't just, go to like a order it. There was no ordering shit online.
yeah. You had,
Or
you had to be referred. You had to actually have, I think, 3 references, if I remember right.
correct. Yeah, back in the day it
Yep.
was, so
From
to
recognized
be
dogmen.
correct. So to and then if you for your matches to be reported in that, it had to be a recognized referee.
Right.
So like a lot of the younger guys may not understand that now you get on the internet and things, if you got the money you could buy a well-bred dog. But back then it was all about word of mouth. Now if this guy's, 1,000 miles away and you're hearing about his shit in New York, I think where he was from where I was, it's about a 10-hour drive, so it's you got to take that in consideration too. There was a time where I visited him. I was still living in New York and I was just visiting him. I didn't plan on taking anything back with me. And we looking at a few, and there was one that he liked, and I liked them and stuff. And Mike said, "Hey, there was a guy in New York, also a well-known, very very well-known dog guy." And Mike said, "And don't you know him?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Think he got this?" I said, "Well, probably." He said, "Well, take him with you." And then I asked Mike again. I was nervous, and because of how I looked up to Mike, I didn't want to let him down.
Right.
And Mike told me, "Well, I tell you one thing, guaranteed, this son of a bitch ain't gonna quit." And it was a rough one. I mean, that we almost didn't, but we pulled it off. And the crazy part about that is the other one that didn't do what it was supposed to actually jumped out of there, and instead of doing what needs to be done, that dog got sold to
Mm,
somebody in Texas.
mm,
So you see the difference between the way some people do the right thing, and then some. Mike would never do anything like that.
right.
And all the stories I'm telling are true. You know what I mean? It's not like yeah. I just put names out there because it's to honor Mike. It's not to bash anybody. You know what I mean? But Mike Wilder was he contributed as much to the dogs as any well-known dog breeder. There's a lot of dogs out there to this day. Well, you can't really be as open. as you once could. But if you ever do you remember strong arm kennels?
Yeah, they had the dog Strong Arm Kennels Bull, and I think it
Well, see,
another one called Yellowstone. Was it?
well, I'm glad you mentioned Bull because Strong Arm bought Bull as a two-time winner from Mike.
Now there was some controversy over the bull. I mean, over the. You remember the dog they had, Yellowstone? I think it was Yellow.
Yeah, but he didn't come from Mike, so
Oh, okay. You can't speak on that
Bull came from Mike.
one.
Strong Arm bought Bull as a two-time winner from Mike.
Now there was some controversy over the.
Correct. It was Hunter Red to a heavy rascal bitch.
Yeah, that was a nice looking dog, and yeah, and did he ever? He champed out, right? Didn't he, Bull?
Yes, yeah, yeah. But before he did, he was a two-time winner
Right,
with, there's a lot of dogs that Mike, uh if you see that weirdo the Ronnie bitch on the that wild side had, Mike had her that they called her CJ5,
right.
or I think she's registered Little Red. That's Rock Bottom's Missy.
Oh, the CJ5 bitch.
Yeah, that's weirdo the Ronnie. Mike had her
She went on to produce real well for Wildside.
for Mike as well.
Mm. Oh, okay.
There's a lot of things that the Mike contributed, not just as a friend. It's words can't describe what kind of friend he was. If you had the opportunity, if you were blessed enough to have Mike as a friend, you couldn't ask for a better friend than Mike. But as far as a dog man, Mike contributed just as much to the breed as any breeder in the history of these dogs. I mean, he did it all from a wheelchair with limited money. It just hard work, dedication. He had a breeding program that he believed in. He told me one time that he believed in. He studied pedigrees. He was a very careful breeder. He told me one time that if you got a tub of ice cream and a tiny rat turd falls in that ice cream, you got to throw the whole tub away. It's contaminated. And that's how he looked at pedigrees. He would go back to the eighth generation if he found something in that pedigree he didn't like. You know, it,
Right.
it ain't gonna get into his breeding program because
Well,
he believed he was very very careful breeder. There ain't nothing wrong making money, and I'm not saying he didn't sell a dog here and there, but he did it for him. He did breedings for himself and his friends.
right. Now you said something about overseas. Speaking on that, when you touched on that, did he sell a lot? Did a lot of his dogs make it overseas?
Some of them did. Some, well, Australia, Indy, Batman. Indy was pretty much